Hello, YouTube. I'm back. Or maybe you've been waking up every day saying, where did Stacey Summerall go the last 3.5 months? I have some updates for you. Two updates. First one is that I am 13 weeks pregnant with my 5th child. This has been the hardest. I have just been nauseous all day, kind of nonstop. So I'm starting to feel better. I sometimes have energy and I am excited to get back to YouTube. And I wanted to let you know, I wrote a blog post about this crazy adventure that happened in the last couple weeks to me. I had a very rare pregnancy complication that was not fun, let me tell you. And I really feel that God just miraculously intervened and healed me. So I'm gonna leave the link to that blog post in the description box below if you wanna check it out. The second announcement that I have for you is something I've been wanting to share for over a year now. I wrote a book. I'm so excited about it. I'm so happy to finally be sharing this with you. It's being released with Ave Maria Press on April 4th of 2025, and it is available for pre-order now. Adventure Awaits: How to Interpret Your Desires and Hear God's Voice is part memoir. It's the crazy story of my life from Broadway to the convent to motherhood, with a stop on worldwide reality television along the way. The greatest adventure really was one of the heart that I was following to find my deeper desires, to actually understand what it was that God's calling me to and what He wants for me, as well as what I want for myself. So if any of that relates to you, you are gonna love this book. It's not just a memoir, it is packed with relatable insights that you can put into action right away to help your spiritual journey. Here's the thing. Surrender doesn't have to be a leap into an unknown void. Surrender can be falling in trust into the arms of the one you know loves you more than anyone else, who has the greatest adventure planned for you that you could never even think up yourself. So a pre-order now actually is an even greater bonus and benefit to me. So anyway, if you want to make my day, go pre-order that. If you want to make my day, you can go pre-order my book. Bobby Angel, cheers. Thanks for coming with me on Called and Caffeinated. How are you?
Great, Stacey. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Are you drinking coffee?
I have I have coffee. I have my salty athlete drink.
Oh,
I have a banana if I start cramping. So ready to go.
so were you like that before you became a dad to 5 kids, or have you always been this prepared, or has fatherhood made you ultra prepared?
I was always prepared. Fatherhood has made me even more of a scavenger of like hide your food, hide the food that you want to eat, or they will
Yes.
find it.
Yes, yes. Also, I want to give a shout out to your athlete drink because, yeah, fatherhood is absolutely a marathon. I'm like out of breath carrying my kids around the house sometimes. It's wild. Oh, thanks for joining me. You have a wonderful new book called The Postmodern Predicament with Sophia Press. I don't have a copy. I usually like to hold up my copy, but I don't think the copies are actually physically released. You have it. Nice. That's great.
It came in the mail a couple days ago. It's hardcover, my first hardcover. It's beautiful. I love the cover. This knight in shining armor looking very confused with
Yes.
modern art in front of him.
Well, it's a rallying cry to all young men who want to, and women too, who want to do something great with their lives and are very confused. And I would say especially men. Are you finding the reception is especially high among men?
I think it cuts across both. I wrote it in a way that is readable, I hope, for the non-philosophers.
Yeah.
Like I was thinking of my wife in mind. Like what is something that the busy parent, the person that doesn't really care for philosophy, what is just the nuts and bolts to help
Yes.
understand how we got here and what do we do about it?
Yes. Well, it was perfect for me because it was like a great reminder of all of these different philosophers that I've heard about, but it would take me so many hours to sift through all of their writings and all of their beliefs. So it was such a wonderful kind of summary of how we got to where we are today. And I learned so much from reading it. So let's start with St. Anselm. Now, he had this He wrote about this. He was one of the philosophers in the medieval era, which actually you rightly pointed out, we don't really talk that much about the medieval period and the how philosophy was actually very significantly developed, but a lot of times it's not taught. So Saint Anselm wrote about having faith first, kind of the primacy of faith, and then seeking to understand second after, like from a place of faith. Nowadays, in our postmodern world, we've got it backwards. We don't believe anything until it can be proven. So, can you tell us why is Anselm's way better, and how do we even get there from our postmodern kind of mentality?
Yeah, it's the difference between faith seeking understanding, like I believe, and I hope to understand, versus the arms crossed skeptical position of most of us inherit today of, well, prove it to me and then maybe I'll
Mhm.
believe.
Yeah.
And it really is like trust. Like, can you trust? And
Hmm.
at the base level, we all have this faith just to function. Like, you have faith your mom isn't poisoning your breakfast. You have faith the car is going to start when you put the key
Mm.
in.
Yeah.
And when it doesn't, we get frustrated when
Hmm.
that trust will break down. So we have faith and trust in all these other kind of subtle areas of life where we expect certain things. Have faith the sun will rise tomorrow because it's and there's a philosopher named David Hume who said, well, we don't even know that just because it's risen for the last millions of years doesn't guarantee it will tomorrow, and that's leads to a really neurotic way to live life.
Hmm. Yes.
But it's a fun thought experiment
Yeah.
of yeah, and so for the disciple, for the Christian, there has to be room for mystery because otherwise, this goes back to Job, like
Mm.
one of the oldest books of the scriptures. You explain yourself to me, God. Like you owe me an explanation.
Yes.
And I feel like throughout human history, because of sin, because of we're all a little screwed up, there is that attempt to put God in the docket, to say, you prove yourself to us, otherwise we're going our own way. And if it's not
Mm.
comprehensible, if it's not understandable to me, when really like the hubris and the arrogance there of like the ant demanding the elephant be understandable. And
Hmm.
now we have a God who lowers himself, who humbles himself.
Mm.
And through divine revelation, through Jesus Christ, does make these mysteries approachable, does lower himself to our level. It
Mm.
doesn't erase all the mystery. I'm rereading A Severe Mercy right now,
Oh, such a good
by
book.
Sheldon. Oh, it's like the Notebook on steroids.
Sheldon Van
You
Auken,
know,
right?
this Van Auken, I can
Yeah.
never pronounce the last name. Thank you.
We
And
got there.
this yeah, you got me there. This atheist pagan couple who intensely in love,
Mm.
and they go from the States to Oxford and have a conversion to Christianity,
Mhm.
have a friendship with C.S. Lewis, which is, you know, super jealous of that. And the letters
Yeah.
they exchanged are in the book and talking about this magnetic pull upon the human heart that God
Mm.
has allowed. And like, because in this weird way, there is a desire to know. We want to know everything about everything. And there's a good in seeking, there's a good in going out and wanting to grow in knowledge and
Hmm.
wisdom. I had a priest professor who said, Christ came to take away your sin, not your brain. Like, so use our reason, use our intellect,
Love
but
that.
also be aware of the mystery.
Yeah.
Yeah, be aware of the fact that there are some things we cannot grasp.
Mm.
And so it takes the posture of humility to say, and then one of my favorite prayers that I pull from scripture is Lord, I believe, help my unbelief.
Hmm.
Like help me, I believe, but there's parts of me that struggle. So it is the posture of faith seeking understanding that Anselm points out that I think is a great first question to kind of dive into this topic with is
Yeah.
what is my approach to the world? What is my
Mm.
approach to knowing? What does it mean to be a good man or woman? What does it mean to be a person of faith? To be a parent? Is
Yeah.
it this kind of, as Dr. Bob Schuchts says, this unholy self-reliance we put on ourselves? I've got
Hmm.
to be in charge. I've got to be in control. I've got to have everything safe for me to maybe have faith, to maybe trust in God.
Yes.
Or, and as the older I get, the more profound this prayer is the posture, Jesus, I trust in you.
Hmm.
Because you got it. I don't need to have everything figured out. I can have faith, which is not turning my brain off. It's not some kind of giant leap into unreason. It's saying there is a limit to human reason. There's a cap
Yeah.
where we get to the shore of the ocean, where now I'm entering God's world
Mm.
and I need to receive. I can't grasp. I cannot force my way into the depths. I have to let myself be drawn into it.
Yeah. And which was the philosopher who actually did exactly what you were trying to say and didn't get there? Which one was it? He tried to reach God just by reason, pure reason.
Probably Descartes. Like Descartes is the
Descartes,
one
yes.
who, yeah, Rene Descartes, who's a French philosopher who really is one of those starting points of the modern time period. So I was blessed as I was discerning the priesthood. I spent 3 years in formation before I
Mm.
really felt the call to marriage. Married my wife of 11 years. We have five crazy mutant children now. And but in my seminary studies, the first few years, you're learning philosophy, which was
Yeah.
really like, we're here to be priests. Why are we not learning sacraments and theology? And I had guys, classmates that were straight out of high school. There were guys like
Mm.
me who had finished college and were in the world a bit, guys in their 30s and 40s, and wondering why are we talking about the essence of a chair? Like dogness. Like who cares? Just pet the dog, just sit in the chair. Like
Yeah.
realizing, listen, we start with the human questions and the human seeking. And we move from that to divine revelation in God
Mm.
and
Hmm.
understanding this four-part story of philosophy, which is the ancient time period to the medieval, to the modern, to now where we are in the postmodern time period, which we tend to think this is how humans have always thought, and not so. The medieval, the ancient time was much more spirit-filled, was much more aware of
Yeah.
the the mystic nature of life, where we have just kind of inherited this scientistic
Hmm.
worldview of if it's not under the microscope and can be proven, it's not really real.
Yeah.
Like if you want to believe in religion and prayer, that's nice. Like that's a nice side hobby, but like it's not practical, it's not really
Yeah.
real.
Yeah. Yeah. It just makes you feel
Like
better.
and we just assume like it's like a flavor of ice cream. But
Yeah.
was not always so. In fact, like for the medieval time period, for the ancient time period, like it was very real and very important and maybe more important. So my hope through the book is to have a bit of, like a pastoral lens of just understandable, like how do we get here? Where do we kind of go off kilter? And to also not always demonize some of these people in history.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people beat up on Descartes and like we can criticize ideas, like
Hmm.
these are bad ideas, but also from like my ministry, youth ministry background in teaching to say like, listen, there's a reason why some of these ideas caught or landed or why
Yeah.
in this profound period of upheaval in the 1500s where the church that is one is now splintered in two. There's a whole new continent that's been discovered that no one ever knew about where we thought the the sun went around the earth, now it's the other way. Like everything was changing
Hmm.
with the
Hmm.
printing press, with the technologies of the day.
Yeah.
So to also have mercy on some of these historical figures that we tend to beat up on
Hmm.
and say, listen, they're also kind of maybe putting a finger to what is just in the water right now. And so
Yeah.
Rene Descartes, who's infamous for this, I think, therefore I am statement, is really the shift of instead of me conforming myself to the outside objective world, now it's all about me as the subject,
Mm.
the subjective becoming more important. And it takes hundreds of years, but now we're in that full fruition of that thought of
Yep.
now it's my truth
Yeah.
versus your truth.
The subjective is all
And
there
people just say
is.
these things. Yeah. And so to find a nuance, to find the balance of, yeah, like there is value in the subjective, in hearing about your
Mhm.
experience, in your story, in your wounds, but to also to keep a foot on the shore of there is objective truth. There is objective good. And
Absolutely.
what we can say is beautiful, the nature of man and woman that we also need to reclaim.
Yes. As you were talking, going all the way back to talking about how I was just thinking about, oh, I'm sorry. Can you still hear me? My microphone's going in and out. You can. Fabulous. Um, I was thinking about how babies, just in our very natural state, when we come into this world, like we have to have faith in our parents that they're not going to drop us as they hold us. And that's how we learned from the very beginning. And we just, what baby doesn't trust that its mother loves it? What baby kind of is like, oh, but what do you think about me? No, babies just love you and they just assume you love them too. And, all things being, hopefully everything's ideal in the baby's upbringing and nobody actually is mistreating the baby. But, it's so easy for a baby to assume that. And I was thinking of that when you were talking about Anselm. And I was also thinking about how when when Christians suffer, I hear this all the time, and this was my experience too, going through times of suffering. That's when you sometimes start to question, why would God allow this? Why is this happening? And that's when that doubt can enter in. Whereas before, maybe when things were going at least okay, it's not hard to believe. But then, we need to really return to that humility and Anselm's posture of I believe, help my unbelief. And and that's not to say that anyone who questions when they suffer is wrong, but it's just like, it just became clear to me as you were talking that that's such a way that the devil can get into our minds. Like he finds that door, that open door, and he comes on in and is like, maybe God's not that good. Maybe God's not real. Maybe God doesn't care about you. It's just been, we've had more suffering in the last 4 years of just having a child in the NICU for an extended period of time, and then having two very difficult pregnancies also since that. That is a constant temptation for me, and I sympathize with anyone who really feels that as well. But also, I recognize there's a point where you just have to become, what did Erin Ingold say? She's the head of Mennonite Catholic, and I'm becoming a mindset coach with them. She said, you have to become the bouncer of your own mind, which I love. Which again is not to turn off your brain, but just to not forget the truth that you know. So that's kind of an aside, but I just found that connection as you were speaking so articulately about everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, think about like the movie Inception. It's like, what is the core belief?
Mhm.
Like if you think about like from an inner vow standpoint, like they're
Yes.
trying to replace the inner belief, the inner vow of this main character, Cillian Murphy, with something else. And it's like, yeah, what's my core belief about God? That he's an
Hmm.
overlord, he's a tyrant, he's an absent father. Because that will be revealed in my behavior, that will be revealed in my attitude when suffering comes.
Yeah.
And a lot of that, you talk about the baby, like you have all the developments we've learned with attachment theory too, of early on, a child is recognizing whether mom and dad are reliable or not, or
Yeah.
do I have to meet my own needs?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so much of this is just like a wounded culture, a culture where there's such prevailing fatherlessness.
Mm.
And it's kind of that nature of sin, that's just this constant rebellion and this distrust in, is God really good? If he really
Mm.
had my back, why did I go through this? Why did I experience this suffering?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
sometimes it's these misconceptions like God should give me everything I want. God shouldn't allow suffering. Like, and here too is where sometimes it needs updating. Like, did God ever promise us a life without suffering? Did God ever
Yes.
promise us a life without the cross? And
Mm.
it's just, not to be brutal about it. It's just kind of sometimes we stay stuck in the first grade understanding of who God is.
Hmm. Yeah.
And yet it's this like, I will be with you in the suffering.
Yeah.
My hands and feet will be there through other people.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Will you
that's,
endure?
yeah. I mean, that's a great, when you say updating, I like that because a lot of times it can feel like we're like losing faith, but it's actually just like you said, it's like we got to level up to where we are now. This is a new circumstance. I'm still always going to be, everybody's always going to be kind of like a toddler that's always learning in a sense. And so God's showing something new to this toddler. And now we have to synthesize that and take that into our consciousness and like learn to live with it and learn what it says about God. But like you said, still primacy of faith there. I want to jump around a little bit because
Yeah,
this is
let's
a
jump.
question. Let's do it. I've been most excited to ask you this question And I'm worried we will run out of time, so I'm just going to ask it now.
Go on.
Okay, I'd be really surprised if any other interviewer had asked you about this. So, I'm thinking about, you mentioned the self. We're now seeing in the postmodern era, like the full flowering of the subjective self. Everything's based around me. What do I want? And I see this a lot. So we built a house this past year. I could have whatever I want within our budget in this house, which was wild, absolutely wild, and such a great experience. But also like kind of overwhelming. So I've been spending a lot of time on Pinterest. And, nowadays it's like you pick your image, you pick your social media image, but then also you pick your aesthetic. What's your aesthetic? There's a lot of like cottage core and dark academia and all this. And
Or grandma chic.
grandma chic, yes. It's all versions of the same thing. And I do love all those styles. So again, I'm not like hating on people on Pinterest. I'm one of these people. But at the same time, I think it's such an interesting thing that there is this huge resurgence of vintage style. And even if people aren't actually reading the books on their shelves, they want to look like the kind of people who would read books. And if you go to Hobby
Mm.
Lobby now, you always see little like Roman woman figure busts, and like it's a kind of self-image of projecting to the world that I am the who learn. I'm a learner. I'm a lifelong learner, and I'm the kind of girl who'd be cuddled up on the sofa reading a philosophy book on a Saturday or whatever. So that's just kind of funny to me that like people go with this aesthetic and they don't actually necessarily have any intention of like living the lifestyle that goes along with people who have these things in their home. But I do actually wonder though if it also because sorry if my mic is going in and out. You can still hear me, right?
Yep.
Okay. There's something going on every time I like adjust the cord. But yeah, I've thought about this a lot because part of me wonders if there's something deeper that's actually seeking a return to tradition, even if only aesthetically at this point. And of course, I've heard from our babysitters who are in college that there are women walking around college campuses wearing essentially Little House on the Prairie dresses. Like they want at least this aesthetic of feeling womanly, feeling like a traditional woman. I have no idea if they intend to, live if they go to church or intend to live any sort of traditional marriage or anything like that, or if this is truly just an aesthetic. And if there's probably an enormous range, but it feels good for someone like me who's never before in my life had traditional things be a trend, but I've always loved them. Like I used to live in England. So this is like something that I don't know, I'm really excited to think about it because when I see the vintage trends coming back, I'm like, dude, this is what I've always loved and now it's cool. This is great. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I have a lot of thoughts. I think it's a
Okay.
good thing because at some level, it's trying to reclaim these trappings of masculinity and femininity
Mm,
that we have so like gone the other way of radical, like I identify with whatever it means to be a man or woman, and it's so we've kind of had the rebellion against the rigid stereotypes, but we are terrible at finding the middle. Like we could swing all the way over here. We're like just trying, and a lot of this is kind of the problem with the postmodern is that it just everything is fluid.
mm,
So everything is just whatever you want to make of it. Man is whatever you want to make of it. Woman is whatever. Like
mm,
there's a good in some of the rebelling against the strict, rigid archetypes.
mm-hmm.
But the problem is like when you're given no compass and no direction,
Yeah.
it's like, well, people like that is crushing. Like that rebellion may be fun for a little bit, but I have to make my own meaning. Like I have to define what a woman means
Mm,
versus kind of resting in the wisdom of old of what here's the thing where go wrong is where when it is just kind of this artificial external only or just this rigid box of like this is what a man does, this is what a woman does, this is what a man should dress like, this is what a woman should dress like, and
mm-hmm.
you're somehow going against the moral code if you don't do it, and a woman shouldn't wear pants or work and all these things, and it's like you kind of have this balance back and forth of like masculinity being so devalued and the patriarchy being so devalued when we really
Mm,
we're longing for healthy masculinity and patriarchy. But out of
yeah.
that beatdown, which again, there's abuses. So there's a reason why this stuff gets
Mm-hmm.
called out. But then you've got the backlash of kind of the red pill alpha male stuff going on
Mm-hmm.
versus, again, like the truly authentic Catholic approach is one of nuance, of finding the virtuous middle, where we can reclaim some of these trappings, but it also, as you alluded to, is there the virtue underneath of it? Like, is there that sense of integration and
Mm-hmm.
where I am growing in, like, not putting everyone in the same box. Like, if prairie girl dresses are your thing, great. My wife may have something different, and there's room for all of it.
Yeah.
I saw the same phenomena with Mad Men, was this show that
Mm.
really
Yeah.
revamped men's fashion for a while. Everyone was wearing skinny ties again and drinking old fashions.
Yeah.
And you had a show that was just so like, in the grunge culture of the 90s and the early 2000s, and
Mm-hmm.
men, like, we just dress like little boys all the time. It's like, oh, like there's a desire to dress like men again and
Yeah.
wear suits and go from the super 90s, like Friends oversized suits to like the slim ties, the slim suits.
Yes. Love
But again,
those.
it's just external trappings though, because no
Mm.
one on that show was virtuous.
Yeah.
Like, I was watching that show, I remember thinking like there's no one to really root for because everyone is living a double life. Everyone, but
Mm-hmm.
was the genius of that show too was everyone was miserable.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
it by day, you seem like you're on top of the world. Madison Avenue, this advertising firm, um, like men's fashion and drinking on the job, but everyone's miserable. So it
Yes.
kind of showed you the shallowness of, if you're only doing this for the aesthetic, the clicks, if you're only doing this to be seen and noticed or to feel like I'm part of the tribe, that's an
Mm.
important thing too, is I want to
Mm-hmm.
find a community, I want to find the niche I belong to.
Yes.
And great, there's a good there, but I would say we have to go further and cultivate to realize, what does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be a woman? It goes deeper than that. I
Yes.
think overall it is a good against John Paul II talked about, a shamelessness that we have allowed and accepted in the world today.
Mm-hmm.
So there is something to dressing modestly again. There is something to kind of in this wild west of fashion, a
Yes.
reclaiming of the lovely,
Mm-hmm.
of
Yeah.
these these dresses, and there's something great to have daughters in this day and age who, mine are right now all 10 and under, but still to know
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, I'm okay with this fashion, this fashion trend
Yeah.
for my own kids.
Yeah. I grew up in the 90s when all we had was like the mall and what you could order from catalogs. And everybody kind of wore the same things. And that was the era of like the low cut jeans. And
Right.
what I do love that there's so much more choice now. I really do love that. I appreciate that about now. But yeah, that was wonderful. I think you're right. So then how do we thinking about this aesthetic? We've got such a Marxist kind of undercurrent with Gen Z. I mean, it was shocking to read in your book. Gen Z consistently polls as preferring Marxist ideology, which is like scary. So, can you just really clarify for us, how does that stand in opposition to the Catholic view, right? So, and then what are some of maybe, like, I think a lot of people realize some of the more obvious ones, probably listeners to my show are mostly already believers, but yeah, what are the implications that maybe we're not even thinking about of the Marxist belief system in our current world?
There's a chapter in the book where I tongue in cheek write everything is Marxist, but it's partially because it's true in the way that it has continued to morph and create kind of the architecture of all these different beliefs nowadays. So, and again,
Mhm.
I try to take a pastoral approach of why does it make sense that in Gen Z in particular has gone this way. And I think part of it is just a lack of awareness, despite the internet connection around the world, a lack of you don't know what you have until it's gone. And it's easy to just kind of be
Yeah.
comfortable and have all this stuff and feel entitled about it.
Mm.
And if you witnessed, for instance, in 2008, if you witnessed your family losing everything, and if you've seen the cost of living just be on the increase so much to where it just like the college debt or the impossibility of owning a home, like to be able to afford a mortgage versus what it used to be.
Yes.
It makes sense why there's a bitterness towards the system that as it is. And you kind of got the bell of some of the Marxist talking points that
Mm.
if we don't, part of the postmodern issue is it's ejected any kind of meaningful narrative or purpose or history that we used to hold to. Because now it's just every man for himself, your story, your truth.
Yeah.
And if we don't trust authority, if we don't trust in church authority or the government or anyone else, then this whole framework that Marx created of oppressor versus oppressed,
Mm.
applying to everything,
Mm-hmm.
like that takes the place of it. So everything's becomes this crusade. And now Marxism has failed again and again as an economic system.
Mm-hmm.
But what it does is it morphs, and it's morphed into when it comes to environmentalism. Like now it's this good versus evil battle of the climate versus people who supposedly hate the planet. And don't you want to be on the right side of history? It's twisted into the way that when it comes to racism and this sense of oppressor versus oppressed, and it's all about tearing things down. It's not about reconciliation. It's just about this cycle of revenge.
Yes.
And so this constant class warfare where there is no real endpoint. It's always revolution, which
Yes.
seems romantic. But in reality, how violent it is,
Yeah.
how much it espouses just death and
Mm-hmm.
rejoices in it and the overthrow of things without
Mm-hmm.
ever kind of giving you a concrete what are we moving towards? And one
Yes.
of the fundamental issues with Marxism is that it gets the human person wrong. It gets the anthropology wrong, thinking if only everyone was fed, then we'd have utopia.
Mm.
And man cannot live on bread alone. Like the human heart is the battleground of sin,
Mm-hmm.
where there's selfishness, where there's pride, where there's lust. The poor will always be with us, Jesus says. And that's not an excuse to say we shouldn't do what we have to do from a true social justice standpoint, as we believe as Catholics. But the issue again is it gets the human person wrong, Marxist ideology. John
Yes.
Paul II was walking around the Vatican as a young bishop with the collected works of Marx under his arm, and it scandalized some other priests. And he said, "I have to know my enemy better than he knows himself."
Mm.
Like
Mm.
there was already an awareness, and you could even point to Fatima and the warning of Fatima that the errors of Russia are going to spread throughout the world, not just in economic communism, but even the underpinnings of the sexual revolution. Because part of
Yeah.
what Marx also wanted was male and female to be dismantled, the family to be destroyed, children become
Mm-hmm.
property of the state.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah,
when you
that's
look
wild.
at a lot of the yeah, you look at a lot of the gender confusion
Mm-hmm.
that has its roots in the sexual revolution. It actually has its roots in Marxist ideology,
Mm.
which can only really take root out of a postmodern landscape where we don't really believe in truth anymore.
Yeah.
Male and female is whatever we want to make of it.
Yeah.
That goes to your other point too of so in the face of just this flatness, yet there's still this ache to be masculine, to be feminine. And some of these archetypes or stereotypes are with us for a reason.
Yeah.
So women want to dress in a lovely way. Men want to feel strong and feel like I can provide. These are not bad things. And there's a spectrum of how we can live that out.
Totally.
But I also think there you have some kind of hopeful fruit of people wanting to reclaim a sense of what does it mean to be male and female, even if it just starts with the external trappings of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. I couldn't agree with you more. I think one thing you wrote in the book was that Marxism wants equal outcomes, and what we really should be presented with is equal opportunities that allow people to fulfill their dreams and exercise their free will. Not even fulfilling your dreams is not, in my mind, the most paramount. But you cannot take away. Hopefully, you fulfill your dreams, but you cannot take away people's free will, because then there's not even virtue. There's no opportunity to practice virtue there. It's so basic. Yeah, I've been reading a lot about the Department of Education. Didn't even realize like the stuff that has been our money has been going to. This is a hot button issue, especially today as we're recording in February of 2025, because there's, talk about Trump dismantling the Department of Education. One conservative commentator I listened to said very like succinctly, I was listening earlier today, and he was like, they're teaching people on college campuses to hate their parents, to hate everything that is
Yes.
traditional. And that made me think about what you wrote about the communist China. They indoctrinated children and turned them against their parents. And I was like, oh my gosh, that to me, like it's easy to laugh at like, blue-haired gender studies majors or whatever, like, no, we're not taking you seriously. But there is really, truly a battle going on separate from these extreme cases that we can look at and say, oh yeah, I'm separate from that. But even the idea that like everything revolves around me, it just seeps in. And when you presented the medieval philosophers and their way of thinking, and there were some really beautiful concepts that were developed during the medieval period. So what do you see as kind of the way out of this postmodern predicament?
Yeah, there's a lot of great philosophy books out there, and I wanted to give something that's readable, but also gives you something like, well, what do we do about it?
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's a lot of books that kind of explain how we got here, but then it's kind of like, and we're stuck. But as a Christian, there's always reason to hope. One of the medieval thinkings was, again, seeing how divinely breathed into creation was. So reclaiming wonder. And technology is neutral. It's not good or bad. It's how we use it.
Yeah,
But we all know we're on it way too much. And we learn more and more. We could do a whole other episode on the health benefits that we're learning about grounding ourselves and blue light and being in nature and the microbiome and all this stuff. It's like common sense when you think about it. We're part of creation, but we've just become so detached from it. So to reclaim wonder, to reclaim a sense, especially as parents, to get our kids outside, to spend time in the wild that is unsafe, that is unpredictable, where there is dirt, and yet also the stars and chances to just be curious and the regulating effect that being in nature can have.
yeah,
There's so much of the subjective self-focus in this postmodern time period, and technology also lends itself to that. The selfie, the Instagram and social media algorithms that are all me centered. I can create my own avatar in whoever I want to be, and to even to the point of preferring my online self to my real self.
totally.
So part of that, there's a danger there in disintegrating the human person, which is kind of the postmodern thing. It's all about fragmentation and dismantling. Part of the Christian call is to bring back together what sin has sundered. And really, that's the work of Christ, where we get to participate in that. And it starts with us. We can't give what we don't have. So, how are we able to detach and say no to our devices? How are we reclaiming a sense of wonder and calm, shifting out of the constant anxious fight or flight mode we're all in?
Mhm.
Another part of it is art and architecture, why they matter. And when I taught high school, that was one of the easiest ways to get the attention of my students, was to just show the artwork of the Renaissance period, of the high church times, the architecture that was created, the universities, the hospitals that were formed, and then to show pieces of art from the last 100 years that are all this surrealism, just these kind of dots or a banana that's been duct taped to a wall, and this is art. An actual urinal put into a museum, because this is now art.
This is now
The
art.
architecture that is so soul sucking, because that's the point. You look at the brutalist architecture of the Soviet Union,
Mm,
was designed to just teach you you're a cog in the machine, to the fluorescent light office buildings of today, where yeah, they're not uplifting to the human spirit, because that's not the point of it.
yeah.
So part of the education for us is realizing the art matters. The architecture of the building matters. And I've seen many ugly churches in my lifetime that they're not leading you up. They're not leading you to
Mhm.
contemplate the mysteries. So when you do step into a beautiful church, it does shock you in a great way. Like the power of beauty to just kind of cut through and arrest you. And that could be music, that could be a sunset, a human person, or a piece of art that's like, that just captivates me because that's what I'm made for. And
Mhm.
in fact, good art, it's kind of like the dance of culture where our beliefs and our culture is influencing the art, and the art is also influencing the culture.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Totally. I think as I mentioned earlier, we had the opportunity to build a house, and I went into the meeting with the architect saying, I'd like to build a new old house. And it is true that now that the house is built and we have arched doorways and some diamond pane windows, whatever it was that fit in our budget, um, it does have an effect on me. It's amazing. And it has an effect on the people who come in as well. Actually, our moving crew came in and they said, it feels like church in here. I said, that's the best compliment I've ever seen. We did a wall niche with for a statue in our kitchen. So we have a recessed wall niche with a little piece of marble on top and a light. And it's just it's so special. And like, I know that a lot of people don't have the opportunity to like actually build something, but all of us, regardless of where you are, I used to just go look at architecture that I liked. Like when I lived in New York City, I would just seek out, and I owned, a shoebox, or I didn't own anything at all, any property. I would just go look at beautiful architecture and art that I loved. And I think you're right. Like it does have an effect on you. It does change you. That's so beautiful and so good. And what else yeah, is there anything else you want to share about just besides kind of these transcendentals, right? Truth, goodness, and beauty, and you're kind of coming at it from a beauty and wonder perspective. Anything else that you want people to take away? I mean, there's more in your book that I know you don't have time to share now, so people should just go buy the book. But anything else you want to leave us with about yeah, I mean, the way forward maybe in the United States of America in, 2025, we have a new administration coming in. We have so many changes. Do you feel a hope from that? You think there'll be a corresponding kind of social movement towards
I think
a
so.
golden
I think
age?
so too. You're seeing the excitement. You're seeing kind of the common sense reclaiming of some of these things that were so aggressively attacked and attempted to be dismantled.
Yeah,
You see the pushback of people saying enough's enough.
yeah,
We're going to reassert, like, we have to spell out there are two sexes. Like, there at least you could say, okay, there is some good happening.
yes.
But I do think, again, the ideologies are still in the water. There is still just the rising anxiety and purposelessness of this generation
Mm,
that is not it. Like, we need the law. Same thing with the pro-life movement. Like, we need the laws. Like, we need to work on changing the laws to uphold the dignity of the person. But there's
yes.
also the grassroots, the hard level work that needs to be done. And
Hmm.
as parents, as Catholics, we believe in subsidiarity, which is you um, look at your local, do what you can in your 5 mile radius. If
Yes.
you've got reach and you can do stuff on the internet, great. But at the end of the day, it's like, am I loving my neighbors? In my last chapter, I talk about that, like love, not in the wishy-washy sense, but in like not, we're not called to be nice guys. We're called to be upholders of the truth.
Yeah.
And the earliest Christians were known by their love because they cared for those who were cast out of society.
Mm,
They didn't water down the truth, even when it meant they had to go to their death to be a witness, to be a martyr. And here we are 2,000 years later, and it's on us now to pass on the heritage, to understand it, to let ourselves be transformed by it, to be convicted by it,
mm,
to go into the culture and do the little that we can.
yeah. Which if we all do a little will not be a little anymore. It will be a lot. So yeah, that's a beautiful
Yeah.
commission for all of us. That gets me excited instead of feeling like we're just in this mess and there's no way out. So we all have our commission because we have the treasure of the truth. We have the tradition and the history of the church to bring forward to people. So yeah, thank you so much, Bobby. I will leave a
E-
link below.
even the last thing you said, sorry, the last
Go
thing you
ahead.
said
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
was like just reclaiming. Like, I'm seeing churches that are going through um like overhauls, like interior overhauls, and wanting to make it beautiful and look like a church.
Yes.
I see a new church builds that actually look like Gothic cathedrals.
Beautiful.
And
Yeah.
then like your house, like I'm gonna intentionally design my house in a way that is a callback to beauty. Like those
Yeah.
those are the little things that a person walks in and says like, this is different. This
Yes.
is arresting me in some way. So those are the little things too that
Mm,
we can do, and we can make a little difference.
absolutely. Even just redecorating, like redecorating a room. You know, when you walk into a Catholic home, it doesn't have to be all religious art on the walls. It just, as long as it's beautiful, it's going to speak to the people that are there. And you can do that whatever home you live in,
If
whatever
there's an
city
al-
you live in.
if there's an alcove though, Catholics be like,
I mean, I had a friend send me a message.
Mary's going in that.
She's like, I'm Catholic jealous of your alcove. And I was like, that's holy, right? Holy jealousy.
Yeah.
Yes, we are very blessed. It's an opportunity that I do not take for granted. That's for sure. So we're trying to make the most of it and really use our house, for building up our community here in the Shenandoah Valley. But you and Jackie are doing such wonderful things online. It's just wonderful to see your ministry. Just the two of you are amazing. And I'll leave a link to your book in the show notes. And then I'll you know what? Let's do double promo. Let's put a link to Jackie's book too, right? It could be
Yeah,
a
she
great.
also came out with her first hardcover book, memorizing scripture this year. So yeah, the Lord
Yes.
is, we're just kind of giving him 1 year at a time,
Yeah.
juggling family life and the ministry we're blessed to keep doing. And so thank you for having me on, Stacy.
Oh, you guys are killing it. I have her book on my shelf. I just need to read it and book an interview. But as you know, I'm moving at a snail's pace with this pregnancy. But it is a pleasure having you on, and we'll have Jackie as soon as we can. But God bless you guys. You're doing great work, and congratulations again on the book.
Thank you, Stacy.